This is Bad Movies We Love, part of the Shice Podcast Network.
If you're listening to this, you are the resistance.
Hello, Bad Movie Lovers, and welcome to a very special spotlight session here on Bad Movies We Love, where we don't just talk about the movies, we talk to the people who make them. I've really enjoyed doing this interview series, and I've been very fortunate to talk to a lot of interesting people. And in this Filmmaker in Focus episode, I was joined by broadcaster, musician, actress, multimedia artist, and filmmaker Sook-Yin to talk about free love, collaborative artistry, and the process of adapting her ex-boyfriend's graphic novel into her latest feature film, Paying for It. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the episode. You've done quite a bit. Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me, Nick. Yeah, I've covered a lot of ground. I'm a chronic doodler.
And I mean, this is a sort of like, I'll try to like get through this quickly because this is a special interview for me because Hedwig was a big movie in my family at the time that it came out. So like my youngest sister is a huge fan. She got me into it when the Hedwig, it was like a retrospective or something that was at USC a couple of years ago. I actually lied about being a USC student so that I could get tickets to that show, and we had a blast doing it. And you know, you're a longtime collaborator and friend with John Cameron Mitchell, so this is a big deal for me. So thank you.
Wow, that's so cool. Like, I mean, Hedwig and the Angry Inch and Short Bus have the best fans in the world. And I very rarely hear, you know, it was a big movie in my family, which I really love.
It was. They had the soundtrack, listened to it all the time. It was on all the time in the household.
So sweet.
Yeah, I should have. I got pins at the show that I should have put on, but I'm not wearing something with a lapel where I can actually.
Well, like your folks as well. Your folks loved it.
Yeah, my mom was the one who showed it to my younger sister, and like they loved it, and so it just kind of like continued to like snowball throughout the family.
Yeah, you know, so as an actor, you're sent for auditions, and it's usually a very dehumanizing process. Back in the day, most of the auditions would happen in person, and you would go into a room and stand in line, pick a number, and then go into a room, and there'd be like executives sitting behind a long table, sort of sizing you up, not really giving you any energy, and you do your thing and spill your guts in an audition, and they go, thank you, next. But when I went in for the audition for Hedwig and the Angry Inch, I was met by a guy sitting on the ground, John Cameron Mitchell, the director, Hedwig. And I had brought with me just like a tape full of comedy sketches that I had made on TV. And I was like, you want to see some stuff? And he's like, yeah, put it in. And then we watched it, and it was their funny, ridiculous things that I did on television. And then he's like, this is amazing. Let's make a movie. And I was like, oh my God, this is not the official way of doing an audition. And we hit it off, and we've been friends ever since. And then when it came time to do Short Bus, which a few years later, he told me about it, and I immediately wanted to be a part of it and went through the audition process and was cast as one of the leads in this very strange film that took like all of us. He cast the lead actors before there was a script. So for years and years, we would go down to New York City and then improvise. And through improvisation, our characters were born, and he would bookmark the best improvisations and then fashion a script on that. So like very, unconventional filmmaker, and I learned a lot from John Cameron Mitchell about being a human being on set and how to make art within a community of people, how to take care of one another, treat one another well with reciprocity. And it's very counter to how a lot of film sets run. Just really an extension of family and community. So I love him so much. In fact, we've been talking all this week. I'm really excited to go to New York City. I made this movie Paying for It, and John is the executive producer of the film. He and I give each other notes on what each other is making. So, you know, as I was mulling through various edits, he'd give me notes, and then finally I said, "Well, nobody really knows Chester. Well, people know Chester and I like kind of really underground culture. So people know me from Short Bus, and they know Chester Brown from his underground comics. He's kind of a godfather of that genre, real groundbreaker of that form. But other than that, in the mainstream, it's like very few people know us. So I was like, John, can you be our executive producer? And he was like, yeah, no problem. So it's pretty cool. I'm going to go to New York City next week, and he's got me on the list to see his dress rehearsal for Oh Mary on Broadway. And
Oh,
so he's taken on that role, and he's sharing the stage with Simu Liu, who's in that film, or who's in that play as well. So super stoked to see him. It's kind of a homecoming for me, being able to see some of my pals from Short Bus days in New York City when we screened Paying for It.
well, it's so great that he stayed involved and supported you throughout making this film, and that's really why we're here together to talk today. And as you mentioned, this film is based on Chester Brown's graphic novel from
Mhm.
2011. And when I scheduled the interview, I didn't know that I would have access to the graphic novel. I
Mm.
did manage to get access to it and read the whole thing. And
Congratulations.
thank you. And so Chester mentions in the afterword that you were among the select few readers of the finished product first. So, what was your
Yeah.
first reaction to the novel, and what made you want to begin the process of adapting it into a film?
Yeah. So Chester Brown is one of my favorite storytellers in the world. He's so brilliant. I knew his work. I loved his work before I loved him. And when I read the book, again, I was just blown away. He has a lot of rigor, a lot of ideas, a lot of intelligence, a lot of fair mindedness, a lot of humanism. He's oftentimes illuminating injustice. And so, yeah, I wanted to do it because I found it very profound and an amazing book. So we're going to backtrack a bit here, Nick, so I can explain to your listeners. So Chester and I, so again, I met him when I was a touring musician. I stopped off and played a show in Toronto. Big fan of Chester Brown. Invited him to the show. We hit it off. We fell in love. He moved back with me to Vancouver, where I'm from, and we lived there for a few years. And then I got a job in Toronto as a VJ on Much Music, which is kind of like Canada's MTV.
Hmm.
So we uprooted with our cat Oscar back to Toronto. And so it was a very extroverted time for me, interviewing celebrities, going to shows, playing shows. And Chester's much more kind of introverted. And I'd drag him out to concerts, and I'd lose it. I'd be like, "Where's Chester?" And he's like in a corner reading a book. So our interests were drifting, and I had developed a crush on someone. And back in the day, a lot of people, and probably now, have open relationships. And I didn't want to break up with Chester. He was my family, and he was my love. So I said, this weird stuff was happening. I'd never developed a crush before, and I told him about it. And I said, well, what do you think about, like opening up the relationship? And he was like, Chester is a lover of freedom, his own freedom, and of course, respecting of other people's freedom. And he saw that I was curious, and this is something that I was interested in. And so he said, let's try it out. And so I went on the path of perilously dating, and he was celibate for too long until it was unsustainable. And he has no ability or desire to flirt, nor did he want to be in a relationship. So he went to the logical conclusion, and that was to explore paying for sex in the late 90s in Toronto. Now that became the basis and inspiration for his graphic novel Paying for It. And when that book came out, it was he had the wherewithal to portray what he was experiencing. It's a memoir. So it basically, he saw an entire lack of rights afforded sex workers that puts them in harm's way. And so we wrote a political tract about the decriminalization of sex work. And I thought it was very enlightening to me. And the back of the book, the last fifth of the book are his appendices, notes,
Hmm.
historical notes, ideas. And in there, embedded in there, was this idea that drew the parallel between the struggle for sex worker rights is the same struggle for queer liberation. So back in the 80s, if you were a gay guy in a bathhouse, the police would raid it, all the guys would get arrested, and you'd be thrown in jail because being gay was criminalized. So we've come a long way from that in Canada. Gay marriage is legal. There's been rights, hard-won rights that are now in 2026 being, in some countries revoked. So the pendulum swings. It's
Yeah.
amazing that this movie is coming out at this point in time, which is great. But to me, it had everything to do with human rights. And so I immediately asked Chester if I could turn it into a book. Like I was a character in the book.
Yeah.
So his book is very myopically from his perspective. And he was very careful not to reveal the confidences or privacy of the sex workers he was visiting. And I am, in the beginning, just offering the inciting incident when I propose opening the relationship. And other than that, I disappear because it's
Yeah.
really all from Chester's perspective. And so I knew that I wanted to like, I guess, illuminate the lives of the sex workers. And I wanted it to just not be from his perspective. I wanted to sort of liven it up. I wanted to spar with some of his assertions, debate those ideas. And yeah, so it took a long time to figure out because Chester was very tight-lipped. He did not share any of the details. So I did have to do my due diligence to do research, speak with sex workers, let it play with my imagination, glean clues from the source material and try to figure it out. It was a very challenging adaptation. Um, the first the first script was I thought, oh, this is a great graphic novel. I'll just transcribe the whole thing verbatim. And I did that, and Chester and I were like, this is terrible. Chester was literally saying, this is awful. Don't bother. It's not going to work as a movie. And I said, no, I'll make it work. Damn it. And, it became clear that a episodic comic that was sort of a political track was not a movie. Movies are a different form
Yeah.
altogether. So it really took me a lot of different, hundreds of different versions until I realized one day when I was reading his book for the umpteenth time that he had seen a sex worker on my birthday.
Mm,
And I was like a pang of the old jealousy. I was like, hey, but that was my day.
yeah.
And so I ended up going, oh, that's interesting. Through this whole thing, we remained a couple living in a tiny row house where I'm talking to you from.
Mm-hmm.
And we were able to navigate our separate choices and also our relationship together. And in doing that, I thought, oh, that was another idea that Chester brought up that really captivated my interest, and that was questioning of possessive romantic monogamy. Now, that is the kind of style of romance most people do. I have sex with you, you have sex with me, I only have sex with you, you only have sex with me, till death do us part, or until we divorce. That's kind of the kind
Yeah.
of thing that most people do. And so he postulates, is possessive romantic monogamy really that loving, where we have to contain somebody and fence them in and fence ourselves in? So he's asking, is it really love to do that? Or is perhaps unconditional love the harder love to achieve, where you kind of support and allow freedom to the other person and thereby allowing freedom for yourself? Maybe that is a manifestation that's a higher form of love. I think it is, but I think it's very, very challenging because most of us are fearful and most of us are very possessive. So I thought, okay, those ideas I can hang on our relationship if I just expand his novel, the canvas of his graphic novel, more to incorporate what was going on in our own lives. And when I made that choice, that's when the script all started to come together.
Yeah. I
So
mean,
it's kind of like we call it a double active portraiture.
yeah, I wanted to touch on that because in reading the graphic novel, it is much more centered around like solely his experience. And then in adapting it to the film, Sonny is obviously a much larger character. I think we see you mentioned the reading the novel and picking up on the fact that he saw a sex worker on your birthday.
Mhm.
Sonny, I think, displays a lot more jealousy, just
Mhm.
transparently than we see from how you're written in the graphic novel, which is sort of delivered in a very like matter of fact kind of
Yeah.
way. So expanding the emotional texture by making it, I think, a little bit more focused on your relationship and the understanding of his perspective and your shared perspective at the same time, both kind of trying to navigate the same space. I think it gives it a little bit more like relational texture as well and makes for a more compelling like film narrative. But, the novel's released in 2014. It's set in 99 ish.
Mhm.
And so now when you're making the movie, you're making a period piece from 20 something years ago, a turn of the century, a turn of the millennium period piece. And then at the end of the film, it says that paid sex work is outlawed in Canada in 2014. So what's it like to go back to 1999 and to like tell this story and re-examine your own life to a degree in that time
Mhm.
period?
Yeah, Chester and I both have oftentimes from the get-go, he's been working within the realm of autobiographical comics for a very long time. He's one of the sort of purveyors of the genre. And right from my very first experiences in art telling, I always derive inspiration from my life. So my first short film was inspired by my job walking the streets of Vancouver dressed as a 10-foot egg noodle called Escapade with One Particular Whiskey Noodle. There are some people that can just use their imagination and come up with imaginary situations. Even when I come up with imaginary situations, like my last movie was a ghost story a supernatural ghost story, but it was again derived from a real life experience where I met a ghost in Barcelona. So I find as an artist, I really need that traction to feel real. So I have been working within stories derived from lived experience for a long time. So I know how to sort of distance it as well as sort of craft it. So you're not doing a diary entry
Yeah.
and you're not too preciously attached to the events of your life as you see it, but they're actual risks for you to like reform into a story structure. Um, Working from real life offers the incredible specificity of idiosyncratic behavior. Oftentimes, stories are reductive, they're binary, they're in the realm of like just simplification of people. And we get sort of archetypes. Whereas when you can derive and incorporate real specific things in people's lives, for example, I did go downstairs
Mhm.
in the basement and find a mound of bottles of water that Chester had drunk and put tap water in and put the dates on because he was afraid that one day we'd run out of water. To me, that says everything about his character. A guy who's very much about, finding an escape route and surviving, and those little touches, every one of us have extraordinarily idiosyncratic little things that we do in our lives. So when you can incorporate those things, it becomes paradoxically more universal. So many people go, "Oh my God, that's wild," or they go, "Oh my God, I did this too." So I think there's something really wonderful about that. Chester Brown and I are very, very close, but we're very different people. As you were kind of remarking, his tone is very different. He's much more kind of at arm's distance. He's very cool, very methodical, very logical, very intellectual.
Mhm.
And I'm kind of like very emotional and I'm a hothead. And so it's kind of a combo. This movie is a kind of combo of the two. And for me, I've always really loved flawed characters. There's nothing, I don't really like seeing a movie with perfect people, and it's kind of dull. And I'm really even hard pressed to even think of a movie with perfect people. So, jealousy is one of the hardest and most difficult emotions. It's one that I've had to wrestle with. I feel like I'm much better at, slaying that demon of jealousy, but it really feels terrible. And I wanted to kind of not show myself in the most perfect light. Some people go, "Oh my God, you were really hard on yourself." I do call her Sunny. So she is a work of autofiction. Many of the
Yeah.
things that happen to her are inspired from real life, but I'm also fabricating. So she's a combo. And I kind of wanted to be able to show, you know, most people, they're kind of confounded by, the search for connection or love or sex. And I kind of wanted to see her and Chester as well, kind of make choices and kind of go, oh,
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's actually a really interesting sort of parallel narrative that's happening because what we see with Sunny is like she's kind of a serial dater. And like you said, she's a lot more emotionally grounded, for better or for worse in the case of this particular story. But Chester is a lot more pragmatic and he approaches everything from like a value assessment perspective. And so to have the two of them at this starting point where they're in bed and it starts with that line of I think I'm falling in love with someone else, it's like a brutal thing to hear if you're most people. And Chester's like, "Yeah, okay, I kind of get it. Like do what you need to do." And so they divert their paths at that point. Their paths kind of like divert and then intersect and back, and like obviously the two of you are still friends now. And so in watching the movie and in reading the graphic novel, a lot of the conversations Chester's having with his friends are these conversations about how uncomfortable they are with the notion of him paying for sex. I mean, in the graphic novel, he calls it like whoring. They call it whoremongering. So it's like the most sort of like negative descriptors you can
and
attach to that kind of behavior.
bro kind of culture.
Yeah.
Like
Hmm.
I found it interesting because oftentimes I make movies where the lead protagonist is female. So this is the first one with a male, and I really enjoyed it very much. I think that it's challenging to be a dude in society. We see Chester making these decisions, and then we see he's kind of like a pariah in the world. Even his best friends are like, "What are you doing?" But they're
Yeah.
not even necessarily coming from a moralistic, some people come from a moralistic place, and then other people, the friends are like, what, dude, you have to pay for it? How, like you're a subdued, if you have to pay, they mock him for that, like he's desperate. And it's like, but he only ever, you know, responds with logic, you know?
Yeah, some of it is like very condescending in the way that they speak to him. Some of it is coming from a place of jealousy. You have the whole conversation about cutting in line. He's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, his friend is like, I'm supposed to be next." And he's like, "Well, I just left the line where you have free sex and I moved over to the line where you pay for
It
sex
moves
and that line."
faster.
Exactly. So I love that there like is this like self-referential humor that is there, but Chester still, I think, approaches it from a place of like I said, value assessment. Like when he's on the phone,
Yeah.
when he's going through like who do I want to be with? How do I do this? Do I tip? I'm reading and writing reviews now, like it's Yelp or something. So I think there is like there's an undercurrent of like a baseline humor that I think is funnier than you may pick up on like at first. And I think that's like very important to a story like this. But in terms of maybe this being a hard kind of piece of material for some people that are like
Mm.
not familiar with like ethical non-monogamy or that are like his friends that are like not accepting of him paying for sex work.
Mhm.
What is something that you leaned into to help soften that, and what are the kinds of conversations that you hope people are having as a
Yeah.
result of the film?
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Um, so it's been so interesting to see the people coming out to the film. I didn't want to just preach to the converted. And, unlike his book, it's not necessarily a didactic experience. I try to raise a lot of questions and kind of, let the audience decide for themselves and hope that it inspires them to reevaluate some of their preconceptions or inspires dialogue where with their friends where they can debate the material. I think having worked with John Cameron Mitchell and in my own work we're very much in line. He always strives to hit the heart, head, and funny bone. He often says that the comedy is the sugar that helps the medicine go down.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to kind of make something that's poppy and entertaining. And so with me, it's like I wanted to make it relatable too, because it's just kind of exposure therapy. We all have our biases and ignorances. And if we just kind of like, if you can create a space where you don't feel like you're being coerced, or you're truly entertained by something and led to think about something, that's kind of like what I try to offer. And many people have come in. There have been like lesbian separatists uh, who have come in and immediately hate Chester from the book, and then they're confounded by his depiction. I depict him as a love. You know, he's one of the he's like an angel in my life. He's a person who is so generous. I've seen him. He's not a he's not a wealthy person by any means, and I've seen him give to people in need and his friends in need without ever asking for anything back, which is unreal. He's the guy who comes and waters my plants when I'm away, happily so. He's a really I think he's on some other plane. He's really, he's a Martian, and he's a very benevolent, kind-hearted, fair-minded person. And so they've come away like with assumptions about, customers who pay for sex. They're usually in movies vile, terrible people. And usually sex workers in movies are misguided. They're led down a terrible path. There's some sort of like trauma like gay narratives as well in films. Too often they end with the guy's dead or a woman dead or beaten. Thank God for heated rivalry where we can see there's actual love and fun stuff. It's not this terrible thing. And so, we love stories, but they've also pointed us in flawed directions. Human experience is much more nuanced, and not this sort of like, not all people who pay for sex are diabolical, awful people, and not all sex workers need to be saved. And so I wanted to like be able to offer a different perspective, and it makes me very happy. Many people are coming in going, "Oh God, I don't want to see this. I don't want to see a movie about sex workers." And they're like, "Oh my God, I think I understand a bit more." So I hope that can happen. You can only, as an artist, you make your stuff and you follow your interests, and hopefully it'll attract some people that it can make them think. That's what I love. I love a movie where I'm left with ideas to percolate on.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about the performances, and I'm going to just put a pin in that for a second, because for the introduction of the reissue of the graphic novel, you speak very glowingly of Chester. Obviously, you care very deeply about him. The way that you represented him on film, I think, speaks to that, because Dan plays it with sort of, I think what I described in my notes is like sort of like a puppy dog kind of quality. Like he sort of is like a good person.
He's a good guy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, how did your experience of him change from the point of when like you first met him? Obviously, this story is taking place during your relationship. Then the novel is published, and now making the movie. Like, how has that sort of like character arc for him gone over the course of all these years?
Well, there's okay, so just like in terms of my knowing him as my friend in real life,
Yeah, your perception of him from partner to then being a reader of his work to then like directing this story about
no,
shared
first I
experience.
started off as a fan.
Mm.
And so on the back of his books and comics, he struck me as like a Canadian Franz Kafka.
Oh, okay.
And he's a very odd duck.
Yeah.
And kind of I imagine him like in his little rooming house making all these amazing comics. He has this entire background. Like he's just reached beyond paying for it, and you'll discover so many great comics and great graphic novels. And so I think I put him on, like, I was like, whoa, this Franz Kafka, mysterious, brilliant writer. And then we met, and it was like, oh my God, so sweet. Very, at first I thought he was like, kind of like, an existentialist, heavy, intense person. And then I met him, and he's so light on his feet, a very good tap dancer. natural tap dancer. But he's also very, like people see him, and because he's so shy, they all oftentimes his reputation precedes him, and it can seem intimidating because he's like reading a book, And so I've seen people like, whoa, but then I think of him as a sprite. You say happy dog. He's not a happy dog. Or what did you say?
The way that Dan, the actor, plays him in the
Yeah.
film, almost like a sort of puppy dog. The way that he sort of, I think, receives bad news from his partner and yet
Yeah.
is still like, well, I'm still going to be there for you. I'm going to like be there to
Yeah.
support you and engaging these behaviors. That kind of sort of
Yeah, yeah. So,
nature.
so in my real life, then I came to know him, found that he was sprightly and effervescent and funny, despite his like kind of more grave reputation, and then just dependable. Then like I realized most of my best friends are very grounded, dependable, loyal, good people. I'm so blessed to have these kinds of people in my life. And so that's where we are now. Now we're kind of in the space where there's no there it we just are, that it's deep respect and love between us, albeit very different people. And so somehow it works. Dan Byrne, so in terms of the movie, yes, it's a period piece, but I never wanted to make it nostalgic. So I knew that this was an important conversation to have of this moment. So what I did was I had a very small budget. So I leaned into a methodology that could work aesthetically and for the amount of money that we had at our disposal. So that meant shooting in my house, where the real life events took place. It meant going into my neighborhood in Toronto and asking galleries and restaurants that are era specific. There are a lot of places that still look like the late 90s.
Mm.
Most dive bars are exactly the same aesthetic as back in the 90s. So I went to a dive bar, Sneaky D's. I asked them, they're like, no problem. I didn't have to do anything. It's already production designed. And then also restaurants in my neighborhood, and then also extended. Oh yeah, my friends who live a couple blocks away, I'm like, your place looks like a brothel. And they're like, yeah, we think it is. Because like people knock on the door asking if Lips still works here. So I'm like, perfect. Can I shoot in your place? They're like, yeah. So really casting locations kind of as characters and like a documentary so that they emanate a kind of authenticity. And then also the extension of the casting. So all the sex workers, we've seen movies that are reductive around sex work that hire
Mhm.
people that have no understanding or experience. I knew that I needed to cast people with a nuanced understanding of sex work to elevate the material, to help me when I was on the wrong track, and to uplift the material. And so all of the sex workers are friends of mine from various communities. Some of them are musicians, stand-up comedians, activists, filmmakers themselves that deal with sex work in their own films. Some of them are professional actors. Some of them have never acted before. So right from the get-go, I explained what this was about, what my aim was for, made sure that, they understood what my intention was and they were on board. And so, yeah, cast in that regard for the sex worker roles. For Chester's friends, Chris Sandiford, who plays Kane, I met in my neighborhood on a karaoke night, and he was like a great karaoke singer, very
Oh.
funny. And then I checked out his work in acting, and he was so screamingly funny. And so I cast him. And then so I'd say 2/3 of the people I already knew who I wanted to work with. And similarly, intergenerationally, I incorporate music videos from incredible bands from back in the day, all of whom are my peers. So all I had to do is send an email, or even in this case, shout over the fence to my neighbor Ian, who lives behind me. Hey, can you bring over your video for Thresh Hermit? And he's like, yeah, no problem. I'll bring it over. And like those music videos do a lot of heavy lifting because they
Yeah.
were made in the 90s. So trying my best to make it very authentic. And then also, coming up with a strategy. I knew that I didn't have a lot of time for a lot of covering of different angles. So really embracing Chester's tableau style of comic panel, but also incorporating, I love a lot of Taiwanese New Wave, specifically Edward Yang and Leos Carax's first movie.
Mm.
I love because it's sort of like keep the frame wide and let actors move within that instead of constantly cutting away. I think a lot of the time people cut away because they want to keep it interesting because they know it might fall dull. But if you have talented actors who can sustain a single take for the whole thing, there's nothing like it. It's riveting when you don't have to cut away. So, constructed it like that. But for the main roles, I did go through a more kind of like conventional style of casting.
Mm.
So I saw hundreds of people for the role of Chester. Same lines, same script, and only two actors imbibed the role of Chester Brown with all the qualities that I love in Chester. The same dialogue, other in lesser actors, made him seem like a jerk. So I saw Dan, and in his audition, he was like, "I know the material. I love the material. I'll do anything. I'm fine with full frontal, and I'll shave my head." And I was like, "Okay, great, full frontal. But I don't need you to shave your head because that's a continuity nightmare, and you're going to be sitting in the makeup chair for too long. So keep your hair in." And then I was looking for Sunny, and again, Sunny has to come from a lived kind of alt art space. And so I saw this movie called Rice Boy Sleeps, and Emily Lay was an actor in a tiny supporting role. I don't even know if she had a line, but in this one scene, I was like, who is this person? I'm not even interested in this scene, but I'm interested in her. So I got Emily and Dan together for a chemistry read. They had never met one another. They were on separate laptops. And together they were doing a scene where Chester paints the front cover of a book for Sunny and gives it to her as a gift. And somehow they miraculously passed this book between two laptops between them. And they did a stunning chemistry read together. Like Chester and Sunny are a longtime couple who, though close and very lived in, they kind of bug one another. They challenge one another. So they kind of cajole and kind of like do things that the other is kind of what? And yet there has to be a profound sense of love between them, as there is with Chester and I. And when Dan and Emily did their chemistry read, though they bugged each other, I sense a tremendous deep care and love between them. So I was relieved because that's the key that unlocks the story. If there is no love, there is no story. And so I asked them right there and then, like John Cameron Mitchell did to me, it's entirely unprofessional, but then I was like, thank you for doing this. Do you want to make a movie with me?
Well, I mean, you got some exceptional performances out of the two of them. And I know that I didn't say this up until this point, but the movie is very good. I enjoyed it. It's got a lot of heart and nuance. And I think what I see in the performance is this subtlety, this humanity, this realism that they bring to the screen. What were the core tenets that you discussed with them that were like the tent poles that hold up these two characters? I mean, maybe especially for Sunny because she's playing a version of you.
Yes. So, each actor is different. Dan Byrne is brilliant, so when I'm directing Dan, I can't say too much. And if I'm directing him, I have to be very specific and give a very, very, very good idea that he's never thought of. So I'd be like, okay, great. And supportive, but he doesn't want to hear over complimenting. He wants to get in there and do the work. But if I see something that he's doing incorrectly, I have to tell him why so he can get into the brain. And we're shooting out a sequence. So I know, Chester in his book doesn't really have a transformation of character. But I knew that I had to, when I said to Chester, this movie's about flawed people making decisions and dealing with the consequences. He's like, but I have no flaws. And I was like, oh my God, that's a flaw. So I knew I had to look at his source material and look at what I felt was a development of his character. And there is a development in his character. And so, I had to bring Dan and Chester together. And funnily enough, when they came together. They had a lot of similar life perspectives.
Hmm.
Both of them are very similar, logical, and also pragmatic and funny. And you know, they both have a kind of similar fantasy life. Like I think a lot of sexuality has to do with what happens between our ears, like what goes on in our imaginations. And so there's that one scene with Chester. I mean, that's way more hot and sexy and revealing than actually seeing another person, two people together or two or more people. Like what you do with yourself is says a lot about you and is infinitely interesting.
Yeah, I mean that's something that you explored like through your character in Short Bus as well, is that
Yes.
like,
Yes.
she's struggling to have an orgasm, and so a lot of that is understanding that it's a lot of internalized things and not necessarily all this external stimuli.
Yeah, and with Chester, he had offered me a very interesting clue talking to him and knowing him in that when he was younger, many of his fantasies involved him being a woman.
Hmm.
And so, and then I found that very interesting. And I knew that I wanted to depict that. There's a moment where we're kind of inside his head and he does make a transformation. And as I'm, here I thought, oh, wow, it's wonderfully queer and it's wonderfully fluid. And it says everything about desire. And I thought it was very idiosyncratic. And here I am talking with Daniel and Chester. And then Daniel goes, oh, yeah, me too. It's like, oh, these are much more universal ideas. And so so I love bringing those guys together, and with Dan I just had to like be able to be on top of his character enough to know when he needed to tweak something or give him another sort of internal motivation, and then he would take that and run with it. I was very lucky with Emily Lay in that um she needs much more kind of like emotional support in terms of getting her to particularly difficult emotional scenes. I really needed to like support her, and she asked me for that. Similar when I worked with Kristen Milioti to get her to specific difficult places in Year of the Carnivore, I really had to work through stuff with them. And that was not like a long therapy session, but more like with Kristen, I understood some of the vulnerabilities she had as a young person and could like remind her of those moments, which would get her into the right psychological state. And with Emily is an extraordinary actor whose emotions are very close to the surface. So she can really cry in a heartbeat. And I can, many times I had to say, hold the tears back because it's more compelling when you're on the verge of tears, or, you know, when she did have to go to difficult places, she did need care and love in that moment. And so that was offered, of course. But what I love about Emily is she's not precious. And to me, she strikes me as an athlete.
Hmm.
She rides her bike around. She's like super athletic. And I'm a former competitive swimmer. So athleticism and sports is a big part of my navigating in the world. And the great thing about having lived this stuff, I had all these, you're a director, you're supposed to direct a movie. So, your creative keys are going to say, what is this? Who's this? What does this look like? And you have to be prepared to answer every single question. So, having lived the experience, I had documents full of like images taken from real life. I could show Emily specific things on Much Music. There's a one thing on Much Music that was verbatim, where she copied what I did back in the day. And I could show them, pictures of me in Chester and just like, yeah, spaces for the key creatives to understand the kind of world building that I was interested in, costumes, locations, every aspect. And so Emily was hungry for that. And she would, do a take and she'd go, come tell me more. I can do another one. I can do better. I can do better. She's never down for the count. And she was never, you know, she was always just good to go and stoked to like try to do her best and excel. And also really wonderful in that she doesn't care how shitty she looks. Like, this from Short Bus, right? My
Yeah.
character is a walking embarrassment. Sophia, she's in this sort of group of extremely cool people, and she is not cool. She's really trying hard to be cool. And I knew that judging from the clothes they were making me wear, and judging from the script that I helped create her, that she was kind of a walking embarrassing person. So John said to me, "Do you want to see any of the rushes?" And I knew, no, I can't see the rushes because I'm going to see how embarrassing this is, and I'm going to want me to look better, and I'm going to want you to shoot me looking better, and I can't afford that. I have to stay true to this character. Many actors want to be shot from their best side. They're well aware of when they look good or not.
Mm.
And Emily and Dan, they don't care about that. They're actors, and they want to nail that moment. So really appreciated that kind of teamwork and that reverence for the story, you know?
Yeah, it's great to have that kind of shorthand too with your actors because you're obviously working on a small budget and I mean you're filming in your own home. And speaking of which, Gail, your cinematographer, did a really lovely job with the film and enriching it. And it's a really like good looking movie as well. Can you talk a little bit about working with her?
Yeah. Gail is, so it was interesting because it was, we're talking about the precarity of independent film. So I was working with Nikolai, another cinematographer, and neither of us thought the movie would get funded. So he booked a show
Mm.
in Europe. By then, we had already done location scouting and half of the storyboarding. And then I was like, Nikolai, we got funding. He's like, shit, I'm overseas. Can you change the date? And I was like, I gotta shoot now, and I can't wait till next year because I don't know if I can crew up. And he said, I respect that. And I'm sorry, I can't do the film with you. So it already been creatively kind of the creative look of it had already been kind of much of the ideas had been kind of implanted. So I was looking for people who could step in and was taken by Gail Yee's beautiful reel, very capable reel. And Gail works in both film and television. And so met up with Gail. Gail was very, very keen. Again, kind of no baloney, you know, masterful artistry and also science. I think cinematography specifically is a combination of arts and science together. Uh, Gail brought in an incredible team. They were kind of like the a real grounding rod. I would say the team, her camera crew, hard workers, a very focused, and quiet, kind of like this. They're kind of like they remind me of the people on the holodeck, in Star Trek.
Okay.
They were like that. I would say the art team were the sort of like fairy dust, fun, beautiful fairy dust people. And yeah, and so yeah, Gail stepped into the role and did it beautifully. Um, and really, because I had a kind of aesthetic understanding of what what it is, was able to take my ideas and change that up very well. During the shoot, we had some difficulties. People felt ill, and suddenly I was I didn't have like one day was like, oh shit, half of our crew was not able to come in. So in 24 hours, you had to find a substitute DP, so cinematographer. And so we were like, oh my God, who's going to step in for Gail? And so our line producer, Charlotte, was like, I know this guy, Daryl, who I worked with on a commercial 2 years ago, and he's got a similar style. Like, has he done movies? Nope. Okay, well, let's see his website. Oh, he's pretty talented. So he shows up the next day with a new AD. Neither of them has read the script. I'm like, okay, so this scene this is what happens here, and it worked out well. Again, very brilliant people. And then we only had 19 days to shoot. So, I have this Sony FX3, a wonderful camera, and I was able to get like exterior scenes through the different seasons. And there were a bunch of holes in the narrative that I needed to like fill, and so reshot or shot the entire opening sequence going over to Chester's actual apartment, shooting stuff with him. So it's kind of like working with Gail was amazing. And then it was also like a huge Herculean effort from one, two, three, at least three other visual camera people and DPs.
The glamorous side of independent filmmaking, right?
You kind of have to like we're very good problem solvers. So
Have to
like
be.
I literally was making tiny dioramas like Godzilla for particular scenes. I had to transform my turn of the century row house into a slick television makeup studio and was
Oh,
able to do that through a series of cutaways.
very cool. But yeah, the movie, I think the way that it looks, it doesn't feel dated. It doesn't feel like glad handing nostalgia, where a lot of
No,
movies that I think like to be period pieces want to sort of like really invest in that. This just feels like a very like lived in time for you and for the people on screen. And I mean, I think that's a testament to you as a director and to your creative vision.
oh, thanks. Well, I mean, it's again, I feel that this is a work as a result of tremendous artists and communities coming together and really trying to find, like, yeah, people thank me and they say, thank you for not putting some like fill in the blank, put a Rubik's Cube or,
Right.
Netscape thing. Like, it's like, okay, no, don't have to do that shorthand. It's all there and trust the audience, find spaces that are real and still of the era, find people who get it. I just feel I'm very, very fortunate to have teachers like Chester Brown and John Cameron Mitchell, people that have inspired and influenced me.
Well, the benefit of that style too is that it has this timeless nature to it. In that, like, I'm not watching the movie thinking, "Oh, this is 1999. I'm looking for all this shorthand that you mentioned," right? But I'm also not like, "Oh, why isn't somebody picking up a cell phone?" It feels like this thing that can just exist in any time, and that's to its benefit because I think that is ultimately the point: is that this is sort of like a microcosm of a much larger story that people aren't talking about. And you've worked across music, television, radio, acting, directing, like a true multi hyphenate. So I'm curious, like, where does this movie sort of fall for you in your personal creative journey?
Well, it's ongoing, and I think as a young person, I really looked up to artists and was very inspired and influenced by the art and films of that I love, music. So I felt that it was a calling and a mantle, and there is an amount of responsibility that I have as an artist to procure work that I feel is useful and entertaining. And so, yeah, I mean, life is art and art is life. So they're sort of synonymous. And the way that I like to think of it is right now, in this point in my life, because I've covered a lot of ground, people kind of look at me like, oh my God, you've experienced a lot. And I kind of feel like a walking encyclopedia of being able to see arc different movements. So there are even subtle things in paying for it where I wanted to articulate the increasing corporatization of music television. So I was hired to do unscripted live TV and I had a hoot doing it. And then, fast forward and later as it becomes more corporate, I'm being asked to go out to you know, cover DJs for the Colgate DJ Challenge. And then suddenly, manufactured boy bands becoming displacing or, yeah, booting like Nirvana off the charts or whatever, or punk off the charts. It was like prefab bands. And then the same kind of arcing the same trajectory for underground comics. So Chester literally started standing on a street corner with his little handmade zines. And then he got a publisher, an underground comic publisher, and was a toast of the underground comic world. But then they found it harder to find space in comic shelves because they were kind of being pushed out by superheroes. And so there was a kind of corporatization that happened in underground comics as well until his publisher, Chris Oliveros, figured out the idea of making a graphic novel, a collected work in a book that could find a space in actual bookstores. So they were given another lease in life. But you can see that kind of corporate development in league with the gentrification of our cities. These, I mean, on a level, there's just like every frame is jam-packed with symbology, even though you receive it like a pretty simple, sweethearted story. There's many sort of undercurrents there. So, I'm addressing those things as well as addressing kind of like the development of underground comics. It was a boys club, and now it's a genre book publishing dominated by women. So I added a female cartoonist in there as well within their gang. But I mean, I guess getting back to the question that you have, where does it stand? Each medium, I'm very lucky to have music as my first medium because I know what it is to sing an original song and I know what it feels like when it hits my heart. Because it doesn't always hit my heart. Sometimes I'm singing and I'm distracted and thinking about something else and you can hear that in the take. So I have this sort of resonant vibration that occurs when I know I've hit the heart. And I'm able to transpose that looking at actors, when they hit it to me, when I'm watching and it moves me. And it's completely, I can't even explain what it is. I just know when it rings inside of me. And the same with editing. When you piece together songs in a set list, there's a kind of arc of story. And editing has everything to do with music. And to me, has everything to do with the way you piece together the chronology of songs in a set list. So they're all kind of interdependent. And I have explored each of these mediums, and each offers its own specific nuances, but then they all sort of come together. And so I don't know, I feel like this one I was really able to bring together many forms, which I really love. But again, it's just an extension of life. I feel like my credo is like shred it and forget it. My
Yeah.
my creative partner Dylan, who I make music with and I make films with as well, he taught me that, and it's true. You put your guts into it. You do the very best you can, and now I'm promoting as best I can because I'm very proud of this movie and proud of all the good work of my peers on this film. So I'm going above and beyond what most filmmakers do to get it seen, and so but I'm prepared to walk away from it too. So once it's out there, I walk away and I continue to move on to other stuff because, like, yeah, it's just a thing, and it is life, and that's what. At the end of the day, I think I've talked to elders who are like, at the end of the day, I'm not thinking about my achievements. A lot of people really care about, you know, what they legacy, right?
Yeah.
And I guess legacy is kind of like artistically territorially spraying or carving your name in a tree. We are all going to go to dust and we all move on to something else, but I'm less interested in legacy. I am interested in life, and I am interested in giving it all, and the experience of making art with my peers, doing the best, putting it out there, and then moving on.
Well, it seems like you have a very good emotional tuning fork. Put it that way.
Yeah, that's it.
But yeah, speaking of like promoting and doing this, number one, thank you. Number two,
Thank you.
where can people actually see the movie? I think I saw that it is releasing in theaters on January 30th. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I've taken the movie all over the world, across Canada, festivals to Europe, Argentina, a couple festivals in the States. And we were lucky enough to get an awesome American indie film distributor, Film Movement, who's taken it on. And now I am so excited to bring this movie to the United States. So we have, it opens in New York City at Quad Cinema, an
Okay.
art cinema that has been there since 1972. Super stoked to see that. And that's Friday, January 30th, the 7:30 p.m. show. I called in my friends, and you know, it's so inspired by people who are coming to bat for the movie. So John Lee, who he's does a lot of comedies for Adult Swim. And he directed one of the Pee Wee Herman films and Broad City, very funny guy, also a musician. He wanted to do Paying for It and reach out to Chester, but Chester had given it to me and rejected John. And ever since, we've been friends. And so he's coming out and doing the Q&A with Chester and I on Friday.
Awesome.
On January 31st, Q&A is led by Elliot Page. at the 7:30 screening.
Awesome.
Along here, Elliot and I acted in Elliot's last movie. My leg was broken and they altered the script so that I could still be a part of the movie by shooting in my house, then changed the script so that Elliot and I were roommates living in my pad. And so, yeah, so doing that. And then Jordan Tannehill, another friend from Canada, who's like lit the New York theater scene on fire with his play Prince Faggot, is doing February 1st, 1:45 p.m. Q&A with Chester and I. And then we make a beeline over to Los Angeles. There are special preview screenings at Lamley Royal on February 3rd, and Chandler Levac, a great Canadian filmmaker, expat in Los Angeles.
I like movies, right?
Yeah, that's right. They're doing a Q&A for us on February 3rd, the Tuesday. I do Q&As for Chandler as well, so we sort of reciprocate in that way. I do the interviews for Chandler when they're doing, or she's doing her movies. And then on February 4th, it's Mae Martin is leading the Q&A, and Mae's amazing TV maker and also musician and actor. And so, yeah. And then afterwards we bring it to, and then it opens in February 6th. The actual run of it is at Lemley Glendale. And that continues in Los Angeles. Meanwhile, we make a beeline over to Chicago. So slowly but surely it's opening up in other cities, and then it will be available to stream later on in the year in the United States.
Cool. So you are coming to LA to do the Santa Monica one at the Lemley Royal?
That's right.
Oh, wow. Oh, I saw when Chandler brought I Like Movies, I went and saw that premiere here in LA at that theater. So I'll keep an eye out.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is the wild thing. Like, we've been touring it like a band. So I've been going out on the road, bringing the movie, and oftentimes the Q&As turn into like town halls. And Chester and I do like signing graphic novels. We have T-shirts, CDs, posters, stickers, pins. Like, it's kind of tearing a page from, indie rock musicians touring. And it's kind of like making an event as opposed to just having a movie there.
Yeah, very, very cool. Well, I'm happy for you. I wish you all the best. And if I can make it work on the 3rd, I will come out to Santa Monica and I'll watch the screening and be there for the Q&A.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I know we went over time, but I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Okay, Nick. Take care.
You too. Bye. Thanks for joining us for this spotlight session right here on Bad Movies We Love. If you enjoyed the conversation, be sure to follow the show, leave us a review, and share it with your fellow movie lovers. A big thanks to Sook-Yin Lee for joining the show and for being willing to open some doors into not just her creative process, but her collaborative process, her life, and specifically her relationship with author Chester Brown. Paying For It hits U.S. theaters starting Friday, January 30th, and there are showtimes through Thursday, February 5th, and Sook-Yin will be there doing some Q&As with Chester, so check it out. Links for that will be up in the show notes, and while you're there, make sure you check out the rest of the Shiest Podcast Network at shistpodnet.captivate.fm. We've got some news on deck for you in 2026. And until next time, stay curious and take care.